guys, welcome back to session 7 on Java programming. My name is Bindu and I'll be your instructor for session 7. So let's get started. I assume you already understand what do you mean by class and what do you mean by object, right? So what do you mean by class? It is a template or a blueprint or a structure to create zero or more like objects, okay? And what do you mean by object? When you provide main memory to it, right? So when main memory is allocated to a particular class structure, then I will call it as a particular object. So how do you create object? By using new keyword followed by the constructor. Let's say I'm creating account class object, then I will write new account. This is the constructor. Of course, yet we are yet to see what is constructor, how do you use it and all that stuff, why it is needed and all that stuff, that we will see. Okay, now basically when you're going to an interview, the main thing that they ask is what is the difference between abstraction and encapsulation. These are called principles of object oriented programming language, and we will be covering these two first, and then we do have inheritance and polymorphism coming later on. Okay, so abstraction and encapsulation. So now many people do get confused with this particular scenario, and they try to what you call confuse the candidate in this particular aspect. Okay, so we want to clarify it with real life examples. What exactly is abstraction? What exactly is encapsulation principle? Okay, so can you tell me what is a word meaning of abstraction? The actual word meaning, right? So I think some of you might have done your projects and also you might have to read certain IEEE papers, or you have to create what is known as project abstract, right? So you remember the first thing that you submit is what is known as an abstract. After that you actually implement the project, and then you submit the conclusion or what you call as the summary, right? So when you make the summary, that time the project is implemented, but when you create the abstract, the project is not yet implemented. Are you understanding? What you're giving is an idea about your project, or what you call a hypothesis regarding your project. Okay, so the project is not yet implemented, so all you're telling is this is my idea, this is my hypothesis, and that's what you call as abstract, right? So whenever we talk about abstraction, we are talking at the design level. We are not talking about the implementation level, because the project is not yet implemented. Are you understanding? So we are just talking about the design. So when I'm telling that I have a chair, okay, this is a real world chair, okay, whatever, it's the spinning chair, and I ask, say, person 1 and there is a person 2. I ask P1 to describe this particular chair. Obviously, that person is going to tell me different attributes, say the color, say the rotation. Okay, and if I ask P2 to describe his or her chair, then obviously this person might tell the make, right, the texture, some attributes different. So that means the way that this person sees this chair and the way that this person sees this chair is completely different. That means their perspective is completely different, right? So if this person were to write a program and that entity in the program is called as chair, then this person's attributes may be completely different, what is required for this person. And when the exact same object, if I may ask person 2 to use as a chair, then he or she might give some other attributes. Are you understanding? So if I'm telling like this, okay, if I'm telling like this over here, if I'm saying there is a person over here and this person wants to go to the bank, right? So let's assume this is an ATM. Okay, it looks more like a gaming console, but still. Okay, so over here this person is entering the amount. So what do you need to enter? The pin number, right? Nobody is going to ask you what is your girlfriend, your boyfriend's number, right? So nobody is asking you that, right? But if you had asked you, then obviously that would have been a security layer. If they asked you the account number, okay, that would have been an extra security layer compared to a 4-digit pin number. Are you understanding? Why didn't they ask me this account number? Okay, so why exactly didn't they ask me this account number? It is because at this particular scenario, even the user will not remember the account number, because how many account numbers can you remember? Are you understanding? So this is not necessary in this particular scenario. What is necessary is this, and not because I'm hiding the account number from you. Obviously you know your account number, there is no problem. But the reason why I'm not asking the account number is because the right now in the current scenario, what is needed is the pin number, because that is what you can maximum remember, a 4-digit number. Are you understanding? Right now, similarly, suppose God forbid, but this particular person met with an accident. Okay, so I'm taking this person to the hospital. Okay, so suppose imagine this person is going to the ICU. So imagine if that person is in ICU, will they ask, give me your PIN number? No, it's the exact same object, right? But obviously they're going to ask you what is your blood group, right? So they will ask you what is your blood group. They might ask you what is your what you call medical history. Suppose you have allergy, so they can't treat you, right? So this is what is needed of you and not these details. Are you understanding? That means in this particular problem scenario, wherein your scenario was you are inside a banking domain, okay, and now in this particular problem scenario wherein you are inside a hospital domain, okay, then in that case it's the exact same object, but the attributes that is needed in each of these scenarios is different. That means, what do you mean by abstraction? Okay, so what is abstraction? The process of highlighting key features. I'm talking about key features, only what is needed, okay, key features, and ignoring unnecessary details or features, whatever you want, you can call. That is called as abstraction. Okay, that process of highlighting. If I am inside a banking domain, it's the same object, but for me, what are the attributes that is necessary attributes is only PIN number. And when I'm here, what is the necessary attributes? Medical group and blood group, as well as medical history. I understand it. So you highlight only what is necessary, and what is unnecessary I'm not hiding. Notice, when I'm saying ignoring, I'm not ignoring is not same as hiding. Okay, this is what you call as selective ignorance, because maybe it is unnecessary at this problem domain, or because you it is inconvenient to ask you that particular details and all that. So it is just called as selective ignorance. It is not, I'm not hiding the details from you. Okay, so basically what does abstraction mean? It is a form of requirement gathering. That means, for you, if you're in banking domain, what are the requirements for you? I need a PIN number. If you're inside medical group, then these are the details. I'm not going to ask you for your pay scale or anything, right? Of course, insurance, if it's insurance, then I'll ask you insurance details, right? So basically this is a form of what? Requirement gathering. Okay, this is a form of requirement gathering. So the process of highlighting the key features and ignoring unnecessary details. Because what is a mistake that most people tell during interview is that whenever they talk about abstraction, they are talking about hiding. Okay, hiding data and implementation details, which is not right. You're not hiding, it is just not needed in the proper problem scenario, right? So abstraction is basically, if you just write a particular class, okay, class account, okay, then I wrote these are the details that I require in this particular account, then you have already done your abstraction. Now some people say, isn't this implementation? You're writing the class down. See, when people want to gather requirements, some people write in the form of class diagram. What is my requirement? Some people write in the form of UML diagram. What is my requirement? Some people actually write the class and decide what is the requirement. Some people take a piece of paper and decide what are the requirements. Are you understanding? So the designing can be in different ways, but you're just figuring out what is needed and what is not needed. Are you understanding? That is known as abstraction. You're not hiding anything from the user. I understand. It's just that at the current problem scenario, it is not necessary. So whenever in interview they ask the difference between abstraction and encapsulation, notice never use the word called as hiding here in the abstraction part. Okay, because that if you do use that particular word, then they keep on asking you what is the difference between abstraction and encapsulation then, because in encapsulation also hiding happens. Okay, so understanding, whenever you're telling abstraction, do not use the word hiding, use the word as ignoring. Okay, that is known as selective ignorance. Fine. So now, after our requirement gathering is happened, some people write it as a class, some people write it as UML diagram, some people class diagram, some people just on pen and paper. In any way you can design, right? So when you talk about abstraction, it happens at what level? It happens at the design level. Okay, so you can say, what is it? It happens at the design level. Fine. Now let's go ahead and see what is mean by encapsulation. Okay. Okay, in terms of encapsulation, what can we do? See, just like what is it called as encapsule? So you're kind of like putting some sort of capsule around something, and we want to see what is that you're putting it around. Okay, so I'll just write the definition and then I'll explain. So the process of binding data members and member functions is called encapsulation. Okay, what does it achieve? It achieves data hiding. Sometimes you can also tell it achieves implementation hiding also, you can say that also. Fine. Now let's see this definition and try to justify it. Okay, the process of binding data members and the member functions is what is known as encapsulation. Okay, here I'll add one into a single unit called class. Okay, that extra you can add. Now let's see this. If I'm having a class called as account, okay, and in that account class I'm having, say, balance. Okay, so I'm going to make this balance as let's say I'm going to make it as private, because I don't want anybody outside this particular class to use that particular balance, because the balance is kept as private. So imagine I'm going to write the balance as 10,000 like my usual examples. Okay, so I've written the balance as $10,000 dollars or rupees, whatever you want to call it, right? So I have my balance over here, it's inside the account class. Now, can I access this balance outside this particular class? And when I mean by accessing outside the class means actual creation of object of this particular class using dot operator and accessing the balance, right? So how do I do that? So how do I write? Account A, create a reference variable to point to the object. Just creating object in heap space, we don't know where exactly the object is being created, right? So you need the address. Okay, then you write a dot and then you're telling I want to access balance, right? Will this work? You want to print it out or system.out.println, obviously this will not work. Why? Because the access specifier of this is kept as what? Private. Okay, so even though you cannot keep this balance as not private, because we'll yet to discuss access specifier. Lack of access specifier in Java is called as default access specifier. Okay, so we are yet to discuss that. But just imagine that if I don't make this particular balance as private, then in that case anybody outside this particular class can access it. Now you understand, which I don't want, right? But any person cannot access everybody's balance, right? If you go to some sort of banking application, you don't see everybody's balance, right? So only authorized people are supposed to access. So how do I do that, right? Now see, private data members I cannot access the access outside the class. So what will I do is I will create a method. Okay, and that method I'm calling it as a getter method. Get balance. I'm going to create a method. Okay, remember camel casing, small and then capital, and then I'm going to create a method known as get balance. Okay, and in the balance, the balance data type is what? Int. So here also I'm going to write it as int, and this particular method I'm going to make it as public. I'm going to make it as public, and this is going to return me back the balance. Can I access private data member in my own class? Yes, this is data member of your own class, so private access specifier once you can access, there is no problem. Okay, now outside the class using the same object, obviously inside this object this particular method is also there. So using a dot get balance method I can call. Why? How come you can call get balance method? Because this method is what? Public. So public method you can definitely call outside the class, right? So I'm using get balance, which will anyway give you back the balance, and then I will do system.out.println and I will print the balance. This is perfectly fine. But what is the thing that you have to consider is the reason why I make this particular balance as private is so that it cannot be accessed by everybody outside the class. Now what did you do? You created a particular public method that is anyway returning the exact same balance. Are you understanding? So what is the use of writing this particular method rather than that cut this and make this itself as public, right? Are you understanding? You made this private so that nobody else can access this balance and now outside the class, and now you have told that you have made it what, you made it too private, because even if you made this as private, the person whose balance this is, actual account this is, even that person will not be able to get the balance now, because balance is kept as private. So for that sake, I'm creating a public method so that you can return back the balance, so that at least the person who has whose account this is, that person will be able to read his or her balance. But the problem is you have written which access specifier? Public. So if you write public, what happens? Anybody who is outside the class, not only your account, they will also get now. Is in better than that is writing the member itself as public, right? So what is the disadvantage of this? One thing is there, you have written correct, that you have made a public method through which you can access the private data. That is what is called as binding of data. It means you cannot access the data directly. This is not possible, right? Because it is kept as private. But you are accessing the data through a public method. Okay, that is known as binding of data member. This is not as member means member of the class. It can be a variable, it can be a method or anything. So this is the data member. Okay, so binding of data member along with member function. This is member function. You can call it a member function, member method, or whatever you want to call. You can call it, right? So binding of data member along with the member function means in order to get this data member, I need to go through the function. It's like as if you're having one sort of encapsulation. Okay, this is the data member and this is the method. If I want to reach this data member, I have to go through the method. Are you understanding? So I'm encapsulating it. Okay, and I'm binding this data member along with the member function into a single unit known as what? Class. Because inside the class I'm having the method as well as I'm having the data member. But if I want to access the data member, I have to go through the method. Understanding? That is known as encapsulation. But what is the disadvantage of this? If you see in interview, what is being asked? Okay, so is this data hiding? Yes, obviously this is data hiding because you have written private access specifier, right? So the data is hidden from the outside world. So in that case, data hiding is achieved by using private access specifier. But did you hide the implementation? Yes, that is also true. Means how exactly you're getting back the balance inside this? Am I doing some calculations on the balance, or am I calculating interest rate and then I'm giving you back the balance? All that is unaware to me. All I know is I have to call this particular method. How exactly the balance is returned, I am not sure. Understanding? So the implementation is also hidden from me. Okay, so data is hidden because of the private access specifier, and because of what is written inside the method I cannot know. I only know how to call that particular method. Only the public interface, or what you call method, is available to me. Okay, now sometimes in interview what is asked is, they ask that access specifier means public, private, protected and all that. What is known as access specifiers violate OOPS principles. Is it true or false? Okay, the answer is it is true. Okay, like for example, I told you this is kept as private, but this method is kept as what? Public. So if you through the public method you're able to access private data, so might as well make this itself as public, right? So you are violating which principle? You're violating the encapsulation principle. Encapsulation principle means that the data should be hidden. So if you are not able to get directly, at least indirectly you're able to get the data, right? So that means it violates the OOPS principle. And which OOPS principle does it violate? Encapsulation. But this is what we want to avoid. That means if you're accessing through get balance, this is perfectly fine, but not everybody. See, if I go to a banking application, if I go first to their website, do you think directly the balance is shown to me? No, I have to authenticate myself. That means I have to provide username and password. As long as they're correct username and password, then only I will get back the balance, right? So similarly in this, before I return the balance, I should provide authentication. Okay, then it makes sense and you will not violate the encapsulation principle, wherein through the public method you are accessing their private data, but who is able to access? Only the people who are authorized. Otherwise you return zero, the balance. Are you understanding? Okay, so as long as you have provided authentication, then access specifier will not violate the OOPS principle. Okay, so they do ask this question during interview, that access specifier violates the use principle. Is it true? You should say yes, it is true. But in order to avoid that, in order for you to avoid that, what should you do? You have to authenticate the user first and then provide the private data. Okay, so in this case, what is the difference between abstraction and encapsulation? They might ask. So you see, in encapsulation there is data hiding and as well as implementation hiding. But can't you say that if I achieve encapsulation, already I have achieved abstraction, because you just wrote a class here, right? You wrote what are the data members, you wrote what are the data members and what are the member functions. So as long as you have already declared your attributes and the behavior, then you have already decided what is your requirement. Are you understanding? So if you say that I have achieved encapsulation, then it also means that you have achieved what? Abstraction. But as I told you, in abstraction case, you cannot say the binding details, binding part. It is not meant to be told like that. It has to be told as selective ignorance. The necessary details, as long as you did the requirement gathering, that itself abstraction is already achieved, right? So when you have achieved encapsulation, you have already achieved abstraction. Are you understanding? So if they ask the difference between encapsulation and abstraction, you should say abstraction, you are only doing requirement gathering. It happens at the design level. Okay, but encapsulation, you're binding the data members along with the member functions, and here you have the options of hiding. Okay, and this happens at which level? Not at design level. This is actual implementation. You're writing the code. Okay, this is not written on UML diagram, class diagram or anything like that. You have actually written that particular class and specified it. So this is actually happening at implementation level, and this is happening at design level. You understanding? So in interview, this is quite tricky, and they always ask what is real world example. Real world example. So can you do as a homework or assignment or whatever, you find out certain real world principles. Like for example, right, Wolf of Wall Street, they ask, now, can you sell me this pen? So using just a pen, you should be able to tell in interview, explain the OOPS concepts. Okay, abstraction and encapsulation on top of a pencil. Or if there is a glass of water, tell me abstraction and encapsulation on the glass of water. Or if there is a book, then tell me on top of this particular book. Anything. If there is an AC in the room, then they will tell on top of AC, explain to me abstraction and encapsulation. Are you understanding? They ask real world examples, and that's what you have to tell during the interview. Okay, so I hope you are understanding, and do please, instead of hesitating during the interview, do prepare yourself for some real world examples and then go for the interview. Okay, if you have any doubts, please ask me in the Q&A section. Okay, so bye bye, see you in the next session.